What's up, fuckers? It's your boy Jack Slack, Fights Gone By podcast, coming at you on the 5th of February 2020, and we're talking about some fights that are going on this weekend. First, we'll get into some news and talk about matchups that are being made, people who've been released, people who've popped for drugs, and so on. But yeah, we're about to enter a period of about, I think, 8 weeks back-to-back UFC events or UFC and big Bellator events. Which is nice. However, the first 3 weeks of it seem to be like... I don't know what's happening, because there's 500 fighters on the roster, and it seems like the matchmakers can't get 2 or 3 interesting ones on any card. I mean, this pay-per-view card we're talking about today, I'm going to get excited about Dan Ige versus Mr. Bektic. I'm going to moan about Valentina Shevchenko versus Katlyn Chookagian, and we're going to talk about John Jones versus Dominick Reyes, because that's actually interesting. And then there's really not a lot else. You got Juan Adams versus Justin Taffer? You got 2 useless heavyweights who've lost their last fight embarrassingly on the main card of this pay-per-view. They are supposedly, they're supposed to be representing a portion of your $60. It's fucking bad, man. I mean, to put it this way, this upcoming fight night is so bad that I was looking through things that happened in fight history today to try and find stuff to talk about. Interesting thing that I found, Eddie Egan won his boxing medal at the 1920 Olympics, I think it was. And then later he won a medal at the Winter Olympics on a bobsled team, which is very cool because he's the only American to have won a Summer and a Winter Olympics one. However, Winter Olympics, that's the one that Vanessa May and some German duke bought their way onto the teams for. It's rich person sport. It's not real sport. Mind you, 1920s Olympic boxing. Back in the 1920s, I think we've all done that thing where we're like, if we had a time machine, we'd turn up in the 1920s and just smash everyone at sport. Anyway, let's talk about the news. What's interesting going on? Loma Lookboonmee, who I'm very excited for, she's in the next couple of weeks, but her opponent dropped out of her fight at, is that the Auckland card? And Angela Hill stepped in to replace her, my girl Angela Hill, which brings her to, I believe, 6 fights in the space of a calendar year, because she fought 2 weeks ago. So that's crazy. That's something that Donald Cerrone has never done, and he's like the benchmark for activity in a year, in the UFC at least. I think, didn't Shinya Aoki fight 6 times in a year at one point when he was, it was a very brief window that Shinya Aoki was probably the best lightweight in the world, because he was, he's a very one-dimensional character, but there was about a year where he just smashed everyone, and I think there was a tournament in that year too. That was the Dream 2000. Yeah, I think it was sometime between 2008 and 2009, because the 2008 Dream Tournament, he smashed his way through that, lost to Joachim Hansen, then he fought a load more times, like, in the next few months too. But in terms of UFC activity, I think Angela Hill might have just set the record. That's pretty impressive. And a fun enough fight, if you ask me. Because you got someone who has a very interesting striking style that you certainly wouldn't see in kickboxing. You're definitely not going to see in, like, traditional Muay Thai. Against someone who is very much like the top tier of that traditional Muay Thai style, in an environment where it doesn't favour the person with the traditional Muay Thai style. You have to make that work. Not an awful lot of interesting UFC announcements in terms of fights this week, actually. More in terms of drug use. So you got both OSP Ovinson Prue and Diego Sanchez popped for Osterine. Diego popped for S23 as well, which might be a SARM or whatever it is. I don't really know anything about S23. But the way that it worked is that Diego Sanchez, it's very promising for OSP, because the entire thing that the UFC are doing now is cranking down the suspensions on, I think, Osterine, but also just on tainted supplements too. Like, if you can prove, or if you can make a case that you've got a tainted supplement, they're going to give you a much easier time. Meanwhile, fucking Sean O'Malley hasn't been able to fight in like 2 years for the same thing. Got caught for Osterine, and I believe he's having the pulsing thing or whatever it is, isn't it? But anyway, so Diego got a 3-month suspension, but he's already been out for 3 months just between fights. So you just say, "Oh, I served it when I was on holiday" or whatever, and he gets to go into the fight that he's doing. When is it? Next card after. He's the co-main event. You're just like, oh, for fuck's sake. So that bodes well for OSP, but who the fuck is putting all this ostrine and everything? If that is actually, I mean, if people are actually tainted, I believe about 1 in 10 tainted supplement cases. Just personal here, but if people are actually popping for them this much, I mean, what are you putting in your supplements, America? More importantly, as we always point out, every fighter, when they're interviewed, they're like, I'm very cautious about what I put into my body. You've got to fuel the body on top quality nutrition. Almost every fighter is willing to sit down and tell you about how they worked out their vegan lifestyle or whatever. Nate Diaz going on about vegan, but he likes a bit of fish, or Cron Gracie the same. But they don't give a shit what they put into their body regarding supplements. They'll just throw anything down there. 8 or 9 different supplements so that, when you pop, you can be like, oh, well, I do take an awful lot of supplements. It's like that episode of UFC, whatever behind the scenes was called back in the day. They had Sean Shirk on, and he's showing you that he takes like 24 different supplements at a sitting at dinner. And he's eating baby food as well. Just, I might pop for something soon. Let me produce my picnic hamper full of drugs to show the camera. And on the same show, it was so good. Anderson Silva is talking to the camera, and there's a big stack of new needles, but the like insulin needles behind him. And you're like, no one in your family has diabetes, Anderson. We know what's up here. Anyway, moving and shaking, what we got? Stevens versus Cater has been made official for UFC 249. I thought that was already done, but maybe they didn't have a date for it. Maybe they just put it on that UFC 249 card. But I think we've talked about that before and said that that's a good, interesting fight. And the other big news out of the UFC is that Sayar the Great, I'm not going to say his second name, and I may never have to say his second name again, Alex White and Alexandra Albu are all gone. Get out of here. See ya, you're cut. Which is only really funny because of Alexandra Albu, because she got her place in the UFC basically on her Instagram ability, and the fact that I'm not going to sing it today, but she's got an ass like you've never seen, which really was. I'm not being a dick there. That was her. She made it her main selling point. Like everything you ever heard about Alexandra Albu was just like photos of her on the beach doing splits in the sand, with her bikini bottoms up her crack. But she put in a game performance against Loma Lumbini, in her Zumbini. I'm going to keep calling her Zumbini. She put in a game performance against Zumbini in her last fight, but just got smashed. I mean, she's just not great. But I'm going to come back to this because Priscilla Cachoeira is on one of the cards in the next 3 weeks, so that really doesn't matter in women's MMA. Which brings us on nicely to the Bellator signings, to be honest. Bellator signed a O&O professional female fighter. She's got like an amateur record of some kind, but they made a huge deal about it. She was like highly touted, blah, blah, blah. 0 fights. Just like, shut the fuck up, Bellator. Why are you... just classic Bellator. And then they signed Wyatt Barber, who's 1-0. He's Macy Barber's brother, son of Bucky Barber, who just live in fucking Little House on the Prairie. But he's 1-0, and it's stuff like this where it's just anything to cling to the UFC familiarity. Fabian Edwards seems like a pretty good fighter from what I've seen of him, but just like, why they're so desperate? Well, I say that, but one just signed Colby Northcutt or whoever it was and had her fight someone half her size. But I suppose that brings us on to ONE FC and what's happening over there. Sorry, ONE Championship, whatever's happening over there. Fuck it, they can't make me say ONE Championship, ONE FC. Brandon Vera has been booked to fight Arjun Bulla for the ONE heavyweight title. Now that's hilarious because Arjun Bulla has fought like once there and had a couple of fights in the UFC and wasn't amazing. I just liked him because he introduced himself as a Kushti fighter, and he headbutted people occasionally, which was pretty cool too. But he's fighting for the ONE heavyweight title against Brandon Vera, who by all means shouldn't have the ONE heavyweight title because he fought Ong Lashong and I believe got knocked out. Yeah, he lost anyway. And the way that they played that off was like, oh, it wasn't for the heavyweight title. And you're like, motherfucker, the heavyweight title is absolute. It's supposed to be that everyone is, everyone is eligible for the heavyweight title. If you're fighting someone for it, if you're fighting someone and you're the heavyweight champion, that title should be on the line. But no, for some reason it was a non-title fight. I think it was for the light heavyweight title, so they were like, oh, it's not for the heavyweight title. But either way, I don't think we're considering Brandon Vera to be the heavyweight champion there. But then who else have they got? Bring back Roger Gracie, because in his last one, that was in one, might have been KSW, but he just came out with this semi-shilt front snap kick that he was just murdering dudes with. And wafer-thin skin, you could see all his veins. And then the other bit, one news which just broke was while I'm recording, but not really news. I mean, just Gary Tonon saying that he'd like to fight Martin Nguyen, or Win, who is a very good fighter and is the one featherweight, lightweight. No, he was the lightweight champion. He's now the featherweight champion again. And he's very legit. He's very scary. So good on Gary Tonon for calling for tougher fights. So anyway, let's talk about these fights this weekend. I suppose the interesting one, and the one that I just got done writing for Univet, is that we've got Jon Jones versus Dominick Reyes. And Jon Jones is in an interesting spot because, you know, the last 2 fights that he's had, I just couldn't even be bothered to tune in. I watched them afterwards and I was struggling to stay awake through that. You know, he managed to almost lose his title in a fight that was so uninteresting that no one, like, everyone was like, oh, Thiago Santos should have got the decision there. And you're like, would you like to see it again? People went, nah, don't really care. But yeah, I mean, the one against Anthony Smith, he dominated, but Anthony Smith did very little. And the one against Thiago Santos, he had an awkward low-kicking match out of range and somehow looked terrible against a guy who had one working leg. All of that coming off like the big redemption angle where he fought Alexander Gustafsson and had absolutely no trouble with him and finished him in the 3rd round. So a bit all over the place, Jon Jones. But then, you know, if you had to describe him in a word outside the ring, it'd be erratic. You know, generally very good and cool-headed inside the ring, but I think, you know, we can give some credence to the idea that he doesn't train as hard for some of them, or he can look past people. You know, I was watching both Gustafsson fights. I almost did a Filthy Casuals guide to Jon Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson, but, you know, time was getting short and I was like, can I really be bothered? But I had both fights up and I was reviewing the film and looking through and stuff. And the thing that really stood out to me, you know, the first time I watched the second fight was that Jon went from being offensive and trying to play the bully in the first fight to leading Gustafsson around the cage, you know, making Gustafsson come to him. And the reason that's interesting is because, you know, in the first fight, Gustafsson was trying to slide down the side of him. He was trying to circle around him. He was trying to come in from little angles and keep Jon turning. You know, moving sideways, firstly, made it very hard for Jon to target the lead leg with the stomping kicks. But also just meant that Gustafsson could keep him turning and then come in off a mobile base. And the way that, you know, you can look at this is like angling around, so circling around someone or catching an angle on them, cutting an angle on them rather, is much easier against someone who's coming towards you or standing still than it is against someone who's going to move away from you at the first sign of you moving. Like, you can't really... It's kind of like... I mean, if you've got any grapplers in the audience, if you're in like a seated butterfly guard or whatever, say Nogi, or like the classic Marcelo position, you know, Marcelo sits to his butt, the opponent stands. If they step around to your side, they've got like a 90-degree angle on you. That would be like if someone sidesteps on you as you step in a fist fight. But they've got a 90-degree angle on you. If you put your hand out behind you and pull your butt back, you know, so you're moving straight back, you're not even moving away from them, you're going to reduce that angle significantly. And if you go back far enough, they're just going to be in front of you again. And that's the thing, like, the more distance you can create between you and the opponent, the less an angle means. Like, if someone is 90 degrees to me, but right up next to me, that's really bad for me. Someone's 90 degrees to me, but over the other side of the ring, I just turn and face them. You know, it's not that, or I continue walking away and turn back to face them. You know, it's really not that bad a situation. And that was what Jon was creating for Gustafsson in their second fight. He was going around the ring backwards, he was circling, and he was making Gustafsson come to him. And not only did that make it so that Gustafsson couldn't do the lateral movement around him, couldn't angle, but it also meant that Gustafsson had to, it was very predictable where Gustafsson was going to step to. Whether he was stepping across to cut him off, which he didn't really do, because he never really has to do that. He's the guy who's always dancing around. Or he just moved straight to him, made it very easy for Jon to look at what, to know where Gustafsson's lead foot was going. So he was able to land the stomp kicks, he was able to land classic low kicks, he was able to land a lot of body kicks as Gustafsson was coming in. And the other thing that he did was, breaking off combinations, because while Gustafsson, he landed something like 88 head strikes by the third round in their first fight, but, they were flicky ones, a lot of them, but a lot of what he was doing was landing like one good blow in three. He'd jab the body, jab the head, and then throw the right hand, or he'd throw a left hook and then jab after it. It was combination work that was getting him his points. So what Jon had to do was cut off the combination. And this is something that we talk about all the time. Like, if you're fighting a big, strong dude who punches hard, or if you're fighting someone with really fast hands who builds up the combinations, you got to cut them off at the first punch. And another great example I use is Pedro Munoz versus Cody Garbrandt. if someone's got really fast hands, you don't want to be standing there going, okay, I'll slip his punches, or I'll block his punches, or I'll parry his punches or something. But what you can do is you can take a step away, and you can start trying to time their step. Because dudes step in and then jab, or they step in and then they throw their right hand. If you're countering the step, it's a lot easier to do than trying to time his punches, because that's just like watching his upper body and his hands, which are moving anyway. So in that Garbrandt fight, great example, because Garbrandt, like, he stretches out the distance. Garbrandt steps in with his jab, and he's going to cut, or his right hand or whatever, because he's Garbrandt and he doesn't really use his jab. But he steps in, and Pedro Munoz takes his head offline and throws the right hand over the top and cracks him immediately. And I did that a couple of times just by getting Cody to step first. You don't counter the actual punches, you counter the step. But what John Jones did to cut off the combinations of Gustafsson was that he circled out, because he had Gustafsson chasing him. Very hard to combination punch if you're like having to throw 3 punches to get towards the guy. He'd cut an angle off and run out, or he'd duck in on the clinch. Threaten the takedown, come up into the clinch. And what he did with the takedowns was really nice. In the first fight, he was going after the takedowns, like he'd duck in on a takedown attempt, be dragged up by an underhook, and then he'd lock his hands around Gustafsson in the over-under for the clinch, try and hit the inside trip, fail, be down on one knee and have to come up again. But what he's been doing more recently is threatening the takedown just to come up into the clinch and then start beating people up there. And especially Teixeira, Cormier, Gustafsson's second fight, looking for the arm crank. It's super legit, and I'm amazed we don't see more guys do it. And the way that he was landing on Gustafsson was one of the slickest that I've seen him use so far. Which was he'd duck in on the hips, and this was in the first round. He did about 3 times in a row, like right off the bat. Duck in on the hips. Gustafsson will dig an underhook to pull him up, and Jones will put his head on Gustafsson's shoulder. He'll post on him, and that brings his chest away from Gustafsson's, lets him drop his hips back a bit. It's classic counter clinching in boxing too. You post your head, you free your arms, and you bring them back to you so you can keep hitting. Rocky Marciano versus Ezard Charles, great example of that. When you post your head and you put your hips back and you make that space, what happens is that a lot of times the guy's underhook will come out of your armpit. Deep in the armpit, elbow underneath the armpit, or elbow behind the back, even like body lock style. But the deeper they get into your armpit, the more control they have of you. If you can post your head, put your hips back and stretch out that arm, and what happens is once the elbow clears the line of the body, Jones can just whip through and try and crank it upwards, because once it's out there, you can just punch it with your bicep and go straight into that arm crank. Seriously, watch the first round of that fight, because it's gorgeous the way he sets it up. In the first fight with DC, he's doing it too, and DC's corner are like, stop digging the underhook, stop giving him that, stop letting him stretch it out. But that's still like number one defense for a lot of strikers going to grappling. They dig the underhooks hard and they try and pull you up. Think JDS, Krokop, Gustafsson. We'll see if Dominick Reyes does. I've seen him do it a bit, but I don't. The stuff. Well, we'll talk about why that's interesting in a minute, because Dominick Reyes has faced some interesting characters and not really done well against the one super rounded fighter that he's faced. But yeah, that's the sort of strategy I expect John Jones to use here, because he used it against Daniel Cormier the second time, used it against Gustafsson. Really was fucking around against Santos in a way that he didn't really need to, and against Smith he was basically allowed to do whatever he wants. But against good fighters that he respects, he tends to draw them forward and then duck in on their hips, push them to the fence, post his head, beat them up. Really, it's everything to stay out of boxing exchanges, because that's where he's not great. But Dominick Reyes, the few times I've written, or rather the first time I wrote about him was a little while back, and he was just sort of making waves in the UFC. I think it's his 3rd fight in the UFC. Nobody really cared. It was an article I wrote, and I was like, this is really interesting. This guy could be something, and nobody read it. But, that's what they've had going on in the background, as I have said in my Unibet article, while John's been fighting these 2 middleweights who really just showed how bad most of the light heavyweight division is, you got to see Dominick Reyes pick up a bit of experience. And the similarities between Dominick Reyes and Krokop are there. I'm not saying that he's gonna do well in K1 or anything, but the same things that worked for Krokop on the feet work for Reyes. It's that southpaw double attack, which is the left round kick and the left straight. And of course, if you're facing a southpaw, you can do the same thing with your right round kick and your right straight, like Kevin Lee did against Francisco Trinaldo. But even down to the details of that little slide away left to your left and counter, the Krokop open side counter, he does that a lot. That's how he knocked down. probably could have finished OSP in like the last second of their fight. Slid away to his left, threw back the left hand. I think that's how he got Weidman, was it? Or was that a left uppercut? But he did it with the left uppercut, slide back to the left, come back with the left uppercut. Did that against Cannonier, there we go. So kind of minimalist. What he does a lot more than Cro Cop is kick the lead leg, because Cro Cop, until he went back to kickboxing, but Cro Cop was not big on kicking the legs, because I think there's a quote of him where he's like, if you kick the legs, they check once, you break your foot, you can't kick again. If you kick the body or the head, you only need to get them once and they're done. Which is probably true for Cro Cop, but not true for that many other people. So I draw that comparison. Obviously, there's a lot of fighters using that, or there's a few good fighters using that southpaw double attack to the same sort of effect. I did a Filthy Casuals guide to Roberto Soldich, which is one of the ones that will be able to stay up forever because it's KSW and they're cool with me using their footage. So if you haven't checked that one out, and not many people have, obviously, because it's not a highly searched name, but go check that out, Roberto Soldich, Filthy Casuals guide. But the way the southpaw double attack works is that if I have a really good left round kick and I throw it between I throw it at your body and your head and really that's a triple attack. Unless if we include the targets, it's a triple attack. If we just include the weapons, it's a double. It really doesn't matter. Everything's a double attack. But if I throw my left round kick at you really hard, and your elbows start to clamp down, you have your right hand nice and high so that you can take the high kick. It's a lot easier for me to shoot the left straight down the center, especially if every time I move my shoulders or hips to square them up, as I would to punch or to kick, you're doing the same reaction. You're crumpling over and you're ready to take the kick. Just shoot the left straight down the center. The body and the high kick work as a double attack on their own. It's something that you learn very early on. If you want to kick a lot of people in the head, kick them in the body. You learn to kick the body first so that you can kick them in the head, because Michael Bisping versus Belfort or Luke Rockhold, a couple of good body kicks, guys start crumpling over with their forearms too, and you can try and catch them at the top of the... Well, if you catch the top of the forearm even, you can go straight through into the head if they're not really braced for it. And then if you throw the left straight a lot, and you just, you can skewer it in quite quickly, as Cro Cop could and as Dominick Reyes can, you get guys reaching for it. They'll reach with their rear hand to try and parry it, or they'll start slipping. And if you reach with your rear hand to parry, you bring in your right hand away from your face, which is what would be barring the high kick. But a lot of the times you bring in your right elbow away from your body as you reach forward, and that frees you up for the body kick. And if you slip to the elbow side, which is what a lot of people will try and do, Mark Hunt versus Cro Cop did this. His head movement was looking much improved. I think he just won the K1 Grand Prix. His head movement was looking much improved, and then he just slipped right onto Cro Cop's kick. If you slip to your right when the opponent is throwing a left, when you think the opponent is throwing a left straight, you can slip head into the shin of the opponent. So that's how the southpaw double attack works, and that's what Dominick Reyes has been doing. Obviously did it against a lot of absolute jobbers on the regional scene, but has since fought good guys and done well. The one that's quite troubling is, he smashed Cannonier. He made OSP look incredibly one-dimensional, which is fair because OSP is incredibly one-dimensional. And he murdered Chris Weidman in a fight that didn't really need to happen and no one really benefited from. But the one against Volkan Oezdemir is the one that was a lot of trouble. And I think a lot of that had to do with Oezdemir was known as a big banger, but that was something that he really fell into in the course of 3 fights by spazzing out at dudes. The more I see of Oezdemir, the more improved he is, the better rounded he is. And you're like, good, you are one of the technically best guys in this division. Why not fight like that? Showed up Ilia Latifi in an absolutely beautiful performance just by doing smart things and the right things, and not just being like, I'm going to knock him out in no time and then I'm going to do my stupid watch taunt. And what I think was interesting about that fight is that Oezdemir was just working strikes into grappling and just striking from his grappling and then grappling into striking and vice versa. Obviously, Reyes did enough to win the decision in the eyes of the judges, and it was a close competitive fight, but it was a lot harder. We haven't had to see Reyes work that hard ever, so it was a big deal. But from Reyes, you've seen he's fought someone who just wanted to get him to the mat, which was OSP just running at him and leaning on him, and then he fought guys who wanted to hit him, like Jared Cannonier, but he's never really fought too many guys he's never fought a good guy who's good at striking and grappling and using them together, except Oezdemir. I mean, Weidman was, but like Weidman is a ghost at this point. It's kind of sad. And also, a middleweight coming up. I think what will be interesting is when Jones pushes him to the fence, which I imagine Jones will do from a clinch at some point, how effectively Jones can lean on him a head post and stuff like that and hit him. Because a lot of what Jones does best is in fighting along the fence. You've seen him do it against Daniel Cormier, against Glover Teixeira. Didn't do it so much against Gustafsson in the second fight, but he's very, very good at it. It's a position where he gets in a lot of damaging blows, even with his hands, which everyone says are a flappy mess, including me. But when he's head posted on the fence and throwing body shots and stuff there, he's really good. I think it'd be very interesting to see what he does there when, because Jones doesn't hold people to the fence desperately like OSP was trying to do. He just posts his head, frees his arms, and starts hitting. And that could also make it difficult to get an underhook. If you're the guy on the fence, that's a lot of what Dominick Reyes has been doing. He's been digging the underhook, turning the opponent onto the fence. And by all means, he has the physicality to do that. He's competent at digging the underhooks, competent at pummeling and things like that. But what Jones does is, he is able to pin people to the fence, just the top of his head and so on. And Jones is also very good at pinning people with the head post and the overhook. There were times when Daniel Cormier had the underhook, which is what Daniel Cormier and DC are always saying on the broadcast. Once you got the underhook, you can work your way out. But Daniel Cormier had the underhook on him, and Jones would have wrist control and the whizzer and a head post, and he'd be kneeing him and elbowing him and stuff. He's very, very good from that position, and I think it's probably a level above what Dominick Reyes is used to. I think in terms of hypothetical game plans for Reyes, I'd say you're probably going to be made to come forward, which is interesting because all his best counterpunching has been done on the back foot. But I would say don't rush it, don't get carried away, but don't be too worried about the takedown. The thing that stopped Alexander Gustafsson a lot in their second fight was just Jones occasionally dropping on his hips and coming back up. I think you've got to get to work with the kicks early, and you've got to make Jones, you've got to make Jones... Well, John Jones likes kicking a lot, and I think maybe you can get him into the kind of frame of mind he was in the Thiago Santos fight, where he was trying to trade kicks with this guy, just to, and you're like, why? Why are you doing that? I know that it's your favourite weapon, but he's doing well there. But I think kicking to get on the counter, kicking to get Jones coming back to him. I mean, Reyes also has a wicked uppercut, and Jones doesn't really set up his shots well. He just times them as you're coming in. I think if you're kicking and you're waiting for that and you try and uppercut him, that might work well too. The thing about Reyes' kicking is that, I've likened him to Krokop, but he's not anywhere near as sharp as Krokop. Krokop could walk around the ring with you and then one good kick and you're done. A lot of Reyes' stuff is throw up the high kick, catch the arm, throw up another high kick and try and run in behind it. Especially on offense, I find him quite wild. It's the slide away counters on defense, which are nice. But again, a lot of this fight comes down to we want to see John Jones against a tall guy with a good reach. But also, we haven't seen Reyes against too many tall guys with a good reach who can actually fight. We saw him against OSP who just wanted to lean on him. But I'll be very intrigued. And obviously Jones doesn't use his jab very well or a lot, but he does frame wonderfully. He uses his kicks and his leg length well and his height. And of course, the other thing is that Jones likes guys swinging up at him. And it's very awkward for him when he meets someone his own height and they're not giving up a couple of inches on their reach just by swinging upwards. I mean, what's Reyes' reach? It's 77, 78. So, close to 80, but still giving up half a foot of reach to John Jones. Just shows what a freaky alien reach John Jones has. Anyway, I mean, I'm excited for that fight, more excited than I've been for a Jones fight since the second Gustafsson one, and even then Gustafsson had been, pretty much out of the game for a long time at that point. It's exciting to have a new prospect in the light heavyweight division. And I hope if John blows him out, I hope he does it entertainingly at least. The Smith fight was incredibly tedious to watch, even though it was one-sided domination. Actually, one I would love to see Reyes use, which we're seeing more nowadays. You saw Israel Adesanya try it against Robert Whittaker, and you saw Amanda Nunes try it several times and then succeed with it against Holly Holm, which is when they're throwing the stamping kicks at your lead leg, whether that's an oblique kick or a low-line side kick, just pull the leg back and kick and kick high with it, or kick high with the other leg. Throw high kicks at people who are trying to stomp on your legs. After you've retracted the leg, obviously. Don't take the stomp on your leg while you're standing on one leg. That is like Tony Jaa backwards knee style horror show waiting to happen. Then you got Valentina Shevchenko versus Caitlin Chookagian, I don't know which it is, but could not give less of a shit about this one. I thought Chookagian didn't look great against Joanne Calderwood. But she's still around. She's apparently winning things, but she lost a split decision to Jessica Eye, which should tell you a lot about what you need to know about this fight. Obviously, everyone is saying, like, Valentina's going to murder her, and I'm like, I'm expecting a murder by 5-round decision, to be honest. That's probably what I'm expecting. However, I will share with you, because I'm not going to analyse this fight in any depth, because I have barely watched Katlyn Chookagian, or at least certainly I've watched her in the course of waiting for other fights, but I've never really paid much attention. And Valentina Shevchenko, I'm not going to puff all that up, but I am going to share with you my favourite Valentina comment of the week. And this was the top comment in the thread on some bollocks about Valentina Shevchenko and Halle Berry. Of all the women's MMA champions of all time, brackets, so far, she seems like the most complete human being, by far. Skilled, tough, smart, beautiful, extensive world travels and has lived in the third world for long periods, speaks multiple languages, tactical firearms training/enthusiast, trained dancer, film/arts school, actress, outdoorsy, etc. You can tell she genuinely has her shit together. Like she could probably be a millionaire running just about any business if she wanted. Are there any other female fighters that impressive? I love that so much. Firstly, such an American attitude where you're like, this person has succeeded in one thing and has other interests. They could be a millionaire doing anything. Also, other great notes, tactical firearms training, much better than circus firearms training, and lived in third world for long periods. That is an incredibly attractive quality in a woman. Thank you, Mr. 766AP, you absolute legend. Change your pants and come out of your room and meet some real people. So now we got that wank out of the way, Valentina Shevchenko versus whoever's got a pulse this week. Let's talk about the only other fight on this card that's actually interesting. I mean, seriously, looking down this fight on this list on Tapology, I'm just gonna, like, this is not the best way to judge cards in the world, but it will give you a little hint. You can go down the list on Tapology and you can tell, you know, you can look at Tapology's ranking for each fighter. You know, there are other good ranking websites like Fight Matrix, you know, things like that, but it'll just give you an idea of what they've done. Normally, there will be a couple of fights, like Dan Ige versus Mirsad Bektic, where you go, oh, number 19 in the world at featherweight versus number 12 in the world at featherweight. That's a pretty good fight. Aside from this one, there really aren't any like that on this card. I mean, there's Andrea Lee versus Lauren Murphy. But then you got, like, number 52 middleweight in the world versus number 85 middleweight. Number 106th bantamweight worldwide versus number 125th bantamweight worldwide. You know, it's amazing that the UFC owns 95% of the best fighters in the world, and they still can't get a fucking card together with like 3 or 4 decent fights on that aren't some bullshit co-main event. I describe this card as being, it has 2 title fights in the same sense that you could advertise a 1-bed flat with a large closet as having 2 beds. It is literally, this only works with the idiots who are like, 2 belts on the poster. Seems legit. But Dan Ige versus Mirsad Bektic is the one to care about because it's good fun. Both limited fighters, especially on the feet, but both fun fighters, both really solid grapplers. I posted a little gif of Dan Ige using the inside cut of his opponent's glove cuff. Like, he opens it up and puts his other hand in, like you would for if you were changing to a cross sleeve grip in the gi, and uses that to get underneath the guy and try and heel hook him. And he does it right in front of the referee, and the referee doesn't do anything. Like, these guys are barely paying attention, it seems, half the time. He also headbutts people a lot, Dan Ige. Like, against Jordan Griffin, he gave him about 3 nodders in the opening round. But then, you know, Jordan Griffin was coming wildly at him, so it's a good way to settle people down. Also a great way to break off people's combinations, as we were talking about earlier. That was Evander Holyfield's plan against Mike Tyson. Each time he steps in, you know he's going to be throwing combinations, so drop your head, smash him in the face, and try and left hook him as he recoils. But Ige, really fun top player, does a lot of that stuff where, you know, you get the, you're getting the one hook in along the fence while the opponent's sat, and then you catch the arm across the back, Habib style, and start smashing him. Really good with that cross wrist ride. Or same wrist ride? I don't know. Wrestling terms. Who knows? Over here we call it a cheeky wristy. As opposed to when Andy Risty was caught trying to tamper with his gloves in Glory. Cheeky wristy. But also a good hitter, Dan Ige. And then in the last round of his last fight, he seemed to learn to strike all of a sudden. It was really weird. Like, every fight he's had in the UFC so far, he just swings big bombs. And then after this hard two rounds with Kevin, what was his name? Aguilar, I literally thought, if he could just throw a couple of jabs, and he immediately flicks out a jab, and I go, I made that happen. Then he starts actually striking effectively, and he goes left hook to the body, right straight to the head. He ducks in, comes up with a left uppercut, right straight, knocks the guy silly. Just classic Badr Harry combination there. Right uppercut, left hook. He's just banging out these amazing boxing combinations on the, well, not amazing in a boxing match they would be, but for MMA, amazing boxing combinations on Kevin Aguilar. Having spent 2 rounds just swinging wildly. The other thing was, like, he seems to slow, or certainly when he's very active, as he can be in the first rounds, like he spazzes it out trying to finish people. I say spazzes it out. He's very controlling, smooth, slick grappler, but he does, like, he'll throw himself out of top position. That fight with Jordan Griffin, I think every time Jordan Griffin got on top of him, which was about as many times as Ige got on top of Griffin, but every time that Griffin got on top, it was off Ige going for his back and sliding over and stuff like that. Well, the old Chael Sonnen. But he does seem to slow down in the third rounds, except for that Aguilar fight, which could be the start of a trend towards something better, or could be an anomaly. So who knows? Meanwhile, Mirsad Bektic, he was the fucking Fedor of the featherweight division until recently. Well, not until recently. I mean, he's had a tough run of luck, and he's also had a weird sort of inactivity in the last few years. He was losing a lot of fights due to guys being injured. Took a couple of fights against like late notice replacements, which means you don't get as much regard as if you beat the original guy, or certainly like a name as you might have been booked against. But it's really obvious that he has some flaws on the feet. Aside from knocking out Gianfride Pepe, whose name I love, but who I literally can't picture in my mind who that is. That was a body shot. I'm picturing a body shot on a faceless man. I remember the body shot. I don't remember the person. But really, he's just like a power hitter on the feet. He doesn't really have a lot. And that really showed up against Josh Emmett, who was leading him around and hit him with a nice 1-2. Was it? Did he knock him down with the jab or something like that? You see that a lot in MMA, and people are like, that doesn't happen in boxing. But in MMA, it happens a lot because guys lunge onto the jab. It's not that the jab isn't a strong punch. It's that boxing guys tend to be at a shorter range anyway. They don't tend to be lunging in. Who was I watching get knocked down by a jab as they shot in the other day? I think it was someone against Diego Ferreira. I'm on a Diego Ferreira trip. I've started making the Filthy Casuals guide to Diego Ferreira, but I was like, no one's going to watch this right now. They'll watch it when he's got a fight coming up, so I'll do it then. Or at least I'll release it then. This is my problem. I have like zero regard for deadlines until I have someone breathing down my neck. So I don't work on the logic. I work on the thing I want to work on, which I suppose is a nice way to work in terms of me enjoying it, but it does mean that it's like I then have to hurry stuff out. But Bektic, smashing top player, really good. I was thinking about doing something on just like a little video on how Ricardo Lamas dealt with him, because you don't see Ricardo Lamas on his back a lot. That's the sort of like wrestler that Bektic is. He takes down Ricardo Lamas and tries to keep him there, and did successfully sort of keep him there for a good while. But Lamas was doing that great single wrong side butterfly hook sweep, as we like to call it here. Well, we haven't worked out what we call it yet. I'm going to have to ask him what he calls it, because I put up a gif of it a while ago and he was like, yeah, I got a whole system from there in the comments. But, ran into a bit of a wall in the slowing down badly against Darren Elkins. This is Bektic, sorry, still. And then getting head kicked as a result. I mean, one of the great turnarounds in MMA history. I think we all remember that one being awesome. But, you're just sort of seeing the cracks. Like, if you last through the rounds with him on the ground, you'll have a good shot in the later rounds, which is going to be a real problem. If you're gassing out in round 3, as both he and Ige have, when you get into the main event scene or the title scene, that's going to be a real problem. But also just the flaws in the striking and the woodenness and the difficulty with movement. However, I don't see Ige dancing around him like Emmett did. It's hard to imagine that. But that is the one to watch this weekend for me. I mean, aside from the title fights, that's probably the one I'm most interested in. I'm going to watch Taffa versus Adams? No, what's his name? Fuck. I'm going to watch those two fat heavyweights, because one of them will win. So, you'll get a stoppage somehow, hopefully. Andrea Lee versus Lauren Murphy, actually pretty interesting. Lauren Murphy's tough as hell, and Andrea Lee, really fun from the clinch. That would be in the positives column. Married to a Nazi who murdered a dude, who would be in the negatives column. And then, Derek Lewis versus Ilir Latifi. I didn't even touch on that. That could be fun, because Ilir Latifi, he's moving up, basically, because he had a couple of losses back-to-back at light heavyweight now. And, he got absolutely owned in the Volkan Ozdemir fight. So he's clearly thinking, let's go up to heavyweight. They're bigger and scarier, but in terms of fighting, they're not very good. But in this fight, you're going to have a fun one, because you've got Latifi, who, he can swang and bang, but mainly his thing is taking dudes down and just smashing them. Derek Lewis, his thing is swanging and banging, but getting taken down and then trying to explode up with just bizarre 300-pound man who can backflip but also has back problems strength. This could be... I think Ilir Latifi is straightforward enough that I could see Lewis winning this one and outlasting him even. The guys who've done well against Lewis have been able to throw feints at him, make him swing at air. Derek Lewis will do half the work. In fact, Derek Lewis will do all of the work of tiring himself out for you. You just need to make sure that you stay safe and you feint him out and you have him swinging at air. And to be honest, like the Mark Hunt fight, he came out throwing jumping kicks and shit, and he's done that in a couple of fights. And then he throws his back out and exhausts himself within the first round. But again, Ilir Latifi, not the dude to do that. But when Latifi wins, we will be able to say that Gegard Mousasi could beat Derek Lewis. That's the important factor in all of this. Man, shout out to Rafael Lovato too, because he just found out he's got a horrible brain disease or something like that. He's got to have checked out, but he's basically out of fighting indefinitely. And he said that on Joe Rogan a little while ago. I can't remember the details, but I just remember thinking, fuck, that's terrifying. Anyway, I reckon that'll do us for today. Hopefully, with more fights on, we'll be back to the 2 times a week schedule. And hopefully we'll be back in that schedule for a while, which I really enjoy, because I just enjoy when there are fights on. So if you want to sign up to the Patreon, get all the cool shit we do there, more advanced striking stuff coming, more finding the art stuff coming, more just articles that I love writing and actually interest me. I can write about whoever I want, whenever I want, and it's fucking great. Sign up to the Patreon, read those, and support the podcast. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, including the article that's just going up at Unibet tomorrow, fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack, the most complete woman in MMA who has her shit together and speaks several languages and has lived in the third world for a while and does tactical firearms training and dances and could be a millionaire in any of these things. Bless.